Adam Goldberg, president of the Adam Goldberg Company. You know, I'm an actor by trade. I always feel weird saying I'm an actor because it sounds like such a defining thing, and it's the thing I do to make a living. But I also take pictures. Some might say I'm a photographer, arguably a musician. I've directed a few films, so you know, all those sorts of things. You know, just I don't remember. It just was, you know, a real organic thing when I was a kid. I always kind of was, you know, I was always interested in movies and in acting and memorializing things, documenting things, and so you know, I had a camera from pretty early on as a young kid, and you know, in my teens I got a little bit more kind of officially, you know, engaged by taking a photography class. The school I went to had a relationship with CalArts, the art school in Valencia, where I briefly went to film school and dropped out after 3 weeks years later. But anyway, it's another story. And so, you know, I would take film classes with them, or there were, you know, extracurricular activities. And then they had a photography course and, you know, darkroom and that kind of stuff. And so, you know, I began to sort of, you know, kind of get, you know, there's some remnants from photographs I was taking, or little pieces I did from those days that kind of still resonate with things that I'm interested in, and sort of, you know, kind of conceptually, which I kind of find really interesting. Certainly, as a movie maker, there are things from when I was a teenager that are still completely resonant. I don't know if that makes me like a completely thwarted, you know, sort of adult, or just like, you know, a portentous kid who kind of just knew what he wanted to sort of say. Yeah, I just took a lot of pictures. I was just like one of those kids who just like had a camera a lot. And, you know, I have big boxes of photographs. You know, aside from dabbling here and there, you know, I never took it as seriously as, for instance, you know, directing, which I felt was this all-encompassing art form that used, you know, my eye or whatever, as well as, you know, sound and as well as acting. So all these things that kind of, you know, comprised my interests. But I went through like a period where I became much less interested in photography as any kind of an art form, and much more just in terms of just convenience. And I mean, it really was sometime in the early 2000s when I kind of put my M6, which was, you know, the film camera I was using really primarily, that was just my camera, and I kind of put that down and kind of got a Leica digital thing, and then kind of phones came around, and then I sort of became interested in, I don't know if you could say interested, but I sort of liked the idea that I could take an interesting photo with like a trio. This is like pre-iPhone or whatever. And in fact, the first CD that I made of my music, I took, you know, every song and made a art for it basically. And it was all phone, you know, phone photographs. And I sort of thought that was, I don't know what I thought, like that was sort of pop rebellion, or, you know, Warholian or something, I don't know, or just honestly convenient. But I, at one point, kind of woke up one day and just like looked on my shelf, and I saw my old Rolleiflex, which I never really shot, which I had gotten way back in the 90s. And then I looked at my M6, which had been totally forsaken, and my land camera, my Sesix 70s, like, and I just started to get re-engaged. And I think in no small part due to the fact that I was in a fairly new relationship with my then girlfriend, now wife. You know, she inspired me to take a lot of photographs of her, I guess. You know, I mean, that was a big part of it, really. I mean, sort of a muse, I guess. What was ironic here was that I had been really heavy into Polaroid photography all through the 90s and through the early 2000s. And then, like I said, things kind of fell by the wayside. I wasn't fully cognizant of what was going on with Polaroid and how it was, you know, I mean, I was probably one of the guys who was to contribute to it going out of business, or for them retiring instant film. You know, I'm just one of those people that just kind of stopped using it. Whereas I used to go down to my local camera shop, Sammy's Camera, and I had a kind of a shitty but a Pro Pack camera, they were called, and I would go buy, you know, tons of peel apart film for whatever it sold, $10 a pack, which seems hilarious now. So when I kind of woke up, I was say from this sort of Rip Van Winkle, you know, sleep or whatever, and 2009, and was like, you know, I'm gonna start shooting film again. I was like, oh, that was like the very year that they discontinued it, and the Polaroid stuff, and Impossible was like making the scene, and so I got very active in, you know, and well, first of all, hoarding as much film as I possibly could, and then, you know, in being a supporter and a tester and a blah, 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 you know, pioneer of Impossible Project and all that stuff. And then the kind of fight to save film became, you know, its own journey, I guess. I don't know. I mean, you know, certainly when you go outside of the circle of people like us that shoot it, people are always like, wow, is that a film camera? You know, even if I take out my digital, well, the one digital camera I have left, which is the Leica digital camera, because it's got a real lens on it and kind of looks like a camera. You know, why does that shoot film? Actually, no, this one does it. But, so then you think like, yeah, I guess the average person is just not gonna go buy an old Nikon and a bunch of 35mm rolls of film. But then you see like Kodak kind of trying, you know, they bring back, I don't know if they really have done it yet. I guess they brought back the E100 stuff, and, you know, Freestyle is still, you know, places are still in business, and then, you know, Polaroid, you know, incredibly ironically, after sort of self-sabotaging, now is back in the game. Obviously, it's not the same people. It's just the rebranding of, you know, it's Impossible morphing into Polaroid, and however that worked. But, you know, as I was saying to you before, had they just waited it out a little while just to see what would happen and not destroyed all the fucking machinery, then you wouldn't have to have guys like Doc, who was the guy who, you know, who was the sort of mastermind behind Impossible, now trying to figure out how to, you know, remake 3x4 film, which he's just beginning to do. So, I feel like in the world of let's say Instagram, or, you know, the circles of Instagram, which is where you found me and where we find others who shoot film and that kind of thing. You know, prior to that, I guess it was Flickr, you know. It doesn't seem like it could possibly go anywhere, that there's too much interest in it. But then, you know, you see these funny hashtags like, you know, or they're not even a hashtag, it'll be kind of like some random person. Let's like, you know, and let's say it's like an actor, and on their profile, they have largely pictures of themselves, you know, it's just, you know, it's PR or whatever. And someone will have taken a film shot and they're like, film. And on the one hand, I think that's great. On the other hand, it's like, yeah, so, you know what I mean? It's like, it's like, I don't know if the fetishizing of it is a sign that is a good sign, or if it's a sign that it's just going to it's going to be so weird that anything is like exists on film. I think there's this flip side, downside, but this is me more being kind of a dick. But, you know, prior to digital, everybody shot film. That didn't make everybody a great photographer, you know. But arguably, you shoot a bad photograph on film, you shoot a bad photograph digitally, and the film photograph does look better for my money, you know, whatever. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I really don't know. It does seem like there's a renaissance, but I also feel like if you're in the bubble where the renaissance is occurring, then who knows, you know. This phase where I was really not shooting 35 at all and shooting only medium format made me a much better photographer. I mean, it's clearly what changed, like you said, my thought processes and my seriousness about it, my compositional abilities, my conceptual abilities. I mean, I don't stylistically take photographs that are really that different than things I was doing when I was shooting, you know, hundreds of Polaroids a day, you know, in the late 90s or early 2000s, because it just didn't cost the same, you know. But it's you know, it's better, you know, and I understand photography in a way I didn't before. I really just I couldn't talk to you technically about photography even 10 years ago. With photography, it's sort of more been like, I kind of had an intuitive sense of what I liked and an eye, and then I would find photographers I was drawn to were doing something similar. So when I, you know, first started, you know, seeing Eggleston stuff, I was like, oh yeah, you know, I mean, I always was like obsessed with, you know, gas stations and Americana and, you know, and that type of stuff. Now, that's not the basis of the stuff that I do. The stuff I do is really a matter of practicality, as I tell my friend Ben Parks, who's a wonderful photographer who really creates wild abstract images with film. You know, that I'm just sort of like a fancy snapshot, you know, photographer. There might be multi-exposures and there might be layers involved, but, you know, I'm essentially just capturing what's in my immediate surroundings. But on the occasion that I've had to sort of pull over to the side of the road or drive cross country, which I have, you know, the imagery of a kind of a stark, you know, American landscape has been extremely appealing to me. So guys like Robert Frank and William Eggleston, you know, resonate pretty deeply with me. You know, prior to that, I was you know, into Man Ray. You know, I mean, that certainly, I'm sure, and you know, his layering of images and the surrealism and dreamlike imagery that, you know, that he created, you know, also really resonated with me. So kind of on the one hand, I had these, you know, really sort of, you know, realistic, you know, photographs, or like Cindy Sherman, you know, as another person who, you know, was, you know, obviously that film still stuff kind of sat right there in the middle for me, because it was these sort of intimate portraits that were kind of real, but they were staged real, and then that I think probably ultimately resonates the most with me. Not to say that she was my favorite photographer, but the idea of staging something and creating a scene or some mystery or some drama within something, within a frame that maybe could be, you know, essentially pretty banal, you know. There is a Emmett Gowan. He's amazing. I didn't know who he was, and a photographer friend of mine gave me his book. And I mean, his work has ranged over the years from incredibly intimate landscapes to really, I mean, it's interesting, really zoomed out, wild, wide landscapes. And by intimate landscapes, I mean, he basically documented his family and his wife growing up and older, in this way that's just haunting and beautiful and just incredibly raw. And then he would also just do really interesting things, like, you know, use 8x10 cameras with lenses that didn't have enough coverage, so that they were crazy wide and vignetted, and then just have this again, this kind of real hyper real quality, and it's real direct and wonderful. This thing again of using your family, using your intimate surroundings as this, you know, kind of universal, you know, as this thing which universally resonates, you know, I think I find really appealing. You know, there's an 8x10 photograph that, you know, is, I guess maybe you could say is my favorite one that I've done, which is that photographer I was mentioning, Ben Parks, walking out of our old house, and a big close-up of Roxanne. I mean, did I know, and, you know, that was 8x10 Polaroid, so 809, you know, Polaroid. Did I know exactly how that was going to look? No. But did I take a lot of time? And because it's 8x10, you're really, really trying to figure out how the images are going to kind of work together. But, you know, did I know that, you know, that half of her face was going to be, you know, as obscured as it is, in this way that's, I think, you know, it looks incredibly organic and sort of predetermined. Maybe that was because I spent more time on that than an average one, simply because I was shooting 8x10, and it's such a pain in the ass that, you know, you don't want to have to do a double exposure twice on 8x10, though I've done it. It just takes so much time. But yeah, I mean, sometimes, I mean, an obvious example would be, you know, if I really want to sort of bifurcate a photo and, you know, kind of put something on one side of the frame, one side of the other, I mean, I'll light it that way, or I'll, you know, cover up the lens in a certain way or whatever. But more often than not, it's not that. I have a basic idea of things that I think can work well together and tell a story. And then in the more, you know, spontaneous, snapshotty way, and this has really come out of working with the Nikon F3. Prior to that, again, with medium format, it was much more, I think, you know, sort of kind of conceived. But with the F3, you know, I kind of have 36 exposures, and it's got this double, you know, multi-exposure function, you know, sort of built into the camera, so, you know, you're not hacking it in any way. And it's been fun to really experiment. Now, once you've done that, then you say, okay, well, this works and that doesn't work and this work. And now you go back and you do it again, and you kind of have a clearer sense of what you're going to get, I guess. But I mean, let's face it, the beauty of all of it, whether it's a single shot or not, is that it's surprising. I mean, it's surprising no matter what. I mean, it can be a shot when something develops or it comes out, or you see it later on. Well, it can be extremely disappointing, or it could be a thrill, but it's a surprise no matter how, I think, much you've sort of orchestrated the moment. But certainly much more so when you're dealing with wonky old cameras, and particularly wonky old film. I mean, that's always the thing, which is, I find, the most satisfying, is like wrestling this expired instant film to the ground to try and get it to do something you need it to do, and then when it does work, I don't think that there's a better feeling. Yeah, I mean, that goes back to that question of sort of film versus digital, and is it really film versus digital, or is it digital viewing versus print holding and viewing? And I think that's the bigger issue to me. I think it's less the issue of whether we're shooting film or not, and whether or not we're going to print our stuff. And when I was shooting film a long time ago, there wasn't an issue. First of all, you'd go to the lab and you'd get a stack of your shots, or you would say, okay, and sometimes you'd use them as a proof sheet, or you get proof sheets. I mean, I was getting proof sheets when I was a teenager and being like, oh, I like that. I don't remember exactly why I was getting proof sheets as a teenager. Maybe I was because I was taking photography courses and choosing photos to print. So it goes back to that thing of making things more intentional, being more selective, being more, intentional. But with all of the stuff that I've been doing in the last several years, the stuff that again resonated the most with me were the Polaroids, because you were holding them. Now, then you would scan them, and then you would convert them, then you would look at them again on your phone, and then so you're sort of like, what's happening here? I mean, it's getting so meta, and it's getting so removed from the initial kind of impulse or whatever, the initial product. I'll get really used to the digital version, the scanned version of a photo I've taken. Like, for instance, the one I was just talking about with Ben and Roxanne. And then I'll find it. So I had to print it for the show, and then I'll find the print and I'll be like, oh, I can kind of, it looks like, I mean, it'll be something really, this is super specific, but it'll be like, oh, this is much greener in cast than the scanner really, sort of shifted it bluer, and, stuff like that. But it's like, oh, but that's the photograph. Now it's like, what do I do? What's the real photograph here? Like, I'm not really sure anymore. Is it the photograph I've been living with on my phone and in my various devices and screens, or is this the photograph? And then it becomes this, I just think we're in this weird postmodern era where it's very hard to know. But I will say this, having just finally exhibited my photography for the first time, other than contributing to some group things, largely with the Impossible Project, there's no doubt in my mind that that's the most compelling way to experience at least my own work and anybody's work. I mean, and when I saw that Eggleston shit, outside of a book even, I mean, the books are incredible. But when you see that stuff in person, it's just a different, it's visceral. It just is, it just hits you in a way that it can't possibly on a screen.
So do you print most?
My Mamiya Universal press. To me, in fact, if I were to say what's my favorite camera, I would actually go with that one. Because it's really,
for what reason?
Well, because it's the most versatile camera. It's got a Polaroid back. If you want, it's totally modular in a way that, yes, 4x5 cameras are, but it's handier than a 4x5 camera. It's a rangefinder, which I used to prefer. Now I don't, and I'm kind of getting back to preferring it again because my vision is going. So a rangefinder is actually, has always been preferable because I have bad vision, but also I liked seeing a whole scene. But the more I started to do textured stuff, the more I really wanted to use an SLR or ground glass. But It's a rangefinder, so love that or don't. It's Polaroid back, 120 back. You can do 6x7, 6x9, 6x6. Now the Super 23, which was its predecessor, you could do small movements on. You couldn't use the movements with the rangefinder, but there was ground glass that you could put on the back. Eggleston used the Super 23. In fact, I had William Eggleston sign my Super 23 up there. I went to his show and I was like, Mr. Eggleston, would you mind signing my Super 23? And he looks up and he's like, well, that's one hell of a camera. And I was like, yes. Like Desert Island, that would be the camera.